Are we allowed to say we're back? Am I allowed to say that?
Amy, we've already put a stop to the we're back because we found out that on maybe 4 out of the last 5 episodes we said we're back.
I mean, viewers have come in and said that that's the favourite part of their podcast that they've liked.
Probably is the favourite part, but I hope not.
But we are back.
Yes.
And we have our first guest of 2024.
That's pretty exciting.
That is exciting.
I'm intrigued and excited by what's going to materialise from this podcast because we've been chatting to her and I think Charu has some opinions about things. Fair to say?
Some opinions. It's going to be interesting to see how your opinions and her opinions match up, if they do. So it'll be interesting.
Yes. And, well, with that in mind, I think the opinions may differ a little bit as we go through this podcast because we're going to talk about EVP, which is
employee or employer value proposition, right?
Yeah, I think that's what Google says.
That is what Google says. Well, at least that's what ChatGPT was teaching me about this morning.
There it is. ChatGPT, the first mention in 2024 already.
I have some good AI stories I would like to talk about.
But yeah, today we're going to cover what the employer value proposition means, why it's important for a business. Some would say the heartbeat of the business, and if you stop employer value proposition, you basically stop the business. So it's going to impact things like employee retention, turnover, and a whole other world of pain. So we are delighted to have Charu on the show today. Welcome, Charu.
Welcome. Hello. Thank you for coming to the studio.
Thank you. I'm really impressed. It's such a cool, funky studio.
Shout out to the podcast room at Barnes Bridge and Jamie.
The best podcast studio in London. Yes. The only one that we recommend. Facts.
With beautiful coffee. It's so rich and
exactly. So Charu, you've made the trip across to us today. I think you've already done a talk today, or you've been in a meeting of some kind. Yeah. So hopefully still got some energy.
Well, for this conversation, loads of energy, and it's a conversation we've talked about for some time. So yeah, excited.
Yeah. And genuinely, you are one of the people that I follow on LinkedIn that I learn and get inspiration from, and having you on the show genuinely, not because you're here, because I don't kiss people's butts, do I? But genuinely, it is an honor to have you on the show. You've got an unreal background that I'm not going to list out where you've been, the companies you've been at and what you've achieved, but based on where you've done talks and the impact that you have on the community, I'm really excited to go through the show. So if you don't mind, can you give the viewers a bit of background as to how you ended up in the world that we all know you from? So over to you.
Thanks, David. Well, first of all, that's such a lovely introduction. I'm not sure I deserve that, but it's gorgeous, and I'll put that into my little brag folder. But, if you don't have one, create one.
I also have to say, actually, I remember the first time, I think it must have been maybe a year ago, 6 months, I can't remember the exact time, but I remember Charu messaging you on LinkedIn and how buzzed up you were. Yeah. I remember it. Yeah. And it was like, oh my God, I can't believe she's messaged and she said this. So it's genuine excitement.
Getting emotional, Amy, stop it.
Genuine excitement of having you here.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people, I think, and we're already interrupting our intro, but there's a lot of people that talk a lot, that have loads of followers and all that sort of stuff, but not all of it is like genuine, and not all of it do you feel and you learn from. But with Charu, I do. So she's in my top 10.
Oh, that's so lovely. And just actually, I know we're going off on a tangent. I haven't introduced myself. This morning, David, you were posting about LinkedIn cadence and content sharing and, the regularity. And one of the things, my challenge to that is, yes, it's great to have consistency. So I completely agree with what you were saying. And if you don't follow David already, you should, David and Amy. But I think there is something around, I think one of the commentators did say this, is only share when you've got something important to say. So that's what I feel like when I share my content, and I'm so pleased that you've said that you enjoy it and you learn from it, is I only share when I think I've got something that's interesting to share or something that's piqued my interest. So I can do it consistently, but I don't go, I've got to share today because it's Monday, Wednesday and Friday. But anyway, my introduction. So I'm Charu Malhotra. I have Worked on, I think, my 7th EVP in my career. I've been really lucky that I've worked at global organisations in talent leadership roles like McKinsey, Unilever, Primark, and so on. And I think, and I was doing this last night because I was reading my CV, for me, it's very much around why is EVP so interesting? Why do I enjoy what I do? It really is that kind of the give and the get of what you give to candidates, and candidates become employees. I know that sounds so obvious, but they do. And that external messaging, that external emotion that those of us that help drive EVPs, and it's never a sole job, can be so responsible for an amazing, retentive, productive candidate who's become an employee, really trusting the messaging that they've seen externally. Or we can also be responsible for somebody that within 6-12 months goes, this is not what I thought I was joining. So for me, it's cool. And we have such a important job to do. I fell into recruitment like so many people, David, Amy, that
everybody says that.
Everybody
when they
says
come on.
it.
Right?
Everybody
Everyone
that
does.
we've met and like, so how did you get here? How did you? Well, I just fell into
Yeah,
it.
but
But I
it's
think
really
that's
right.
also really important. That's the first thing. See, first thing I've learned already. Really important message is that candidates do become employees. Like I think there's a big focus on.
You separate the two.
Yeah, but there's a big focus. We need talent pools. We need candidates. We need to focus on them. But actually, the end goal is that they're going to be hired and they are going to be employees. So you need to focus on that bit up front of focusing on quality candidates and stuff for them. So
Yeah.
I think that sometimes gets lost a little bit in the shuffle.
It does, because I think there is so much focus on the EVP as an external communication mechanism that, and this is what I was talking about this morning, is that bias becomes, okay, let's put budget towards external messaging. Let's put budget or time and resource on what is the outside. That actually, if you think about even more so much now, where budgets are shorter, smaller, and people aren't doing as much recruitment, so therefore the recruitment they do has got to be vital and important and done in a really smart way, that actually the internal activation and embedding of those EVP promises, essences, pillars, whatever you'd like to call it, because as an industry we're so jargon heavy, gets lost. But I do think we're shifting, the corner when you have people realizing that retention and the EVP are so interconnected. It's key. But yeah, that was a really long introduction. Thank God.
I wouldn't say it was that long. You said you fell into recruitment. Was there a world before recruitment? What was that world looking like?
No, I mean, I think 18 years ago, I did a degree that wasn't a vocational degree. I did one in English literature, which is kind of why I'm a word nerd, where I'm in communications. And then moved into recruitment because the options that my dad was like, become a teacher. And I was like, I don't want to become a teacher. I don't really like children, but I didn't say that. But I do enjoy talking to people. As a part-time job at uni, God, I've never told anyone this, I sold double glazing to make some extra income, and I was quite good at it. So those are the days when people are on the phone, not in mails and so on, and fell into recruitment. And you make a lot of money when you're a recruitment agency if you're good, and I was, and just fell into recruitment, and then for various reasons moved in-house because I preferred working for one company versus trying to sell to lots. But yeah, I sold double glazing. I cannot believe I just said that.
Wow. Dreaded back in those days as well. Double
awful.
glazing sales lady.
In my second year, I think did it twice a week, term time. But
was that like knocking on people's doors? Or
oh God, no, on the phone. Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't want to work in a bar.
So you were sourcing your leads at an early age with it.
yeah. I needed a CRM.
yeah, right.
What attracts you to employer branding though, or what attracted you to go down that route? What was it that was like, oh, actually, I quite like that idea?
Well, my first role was at BP in-house, and I was doing a recruitment manager role, so I was recruiting engineers all around the world, and they started transforming the talent function because of various reasons, oil price, demographic time bomb, having to do things differently because the population of engineers was getting older and older, and they had to think about talent differently. And therefore lots of projects came up, which I'm a very curious person. I like doing lots of different things. And so I put my hand up to lots of different projects. Some of them were on the website, some of them were around media, and some were around the candidate journey. And if you think about all three of those projects that I said I want to get involved in, whilst I was doing my sort of day job of recruiting people for Angola and various places all around the world, made me think about the candidate journey. Then you start thinking about, what are we telling candidates and where are they finding their information? So I kind of, again, fell into that. But when you're a word nerd and when you're constantly curious, which is how I describe myself, and it's how I work and operate, you open up one conversation around, why does our website do that? Why does it take that number of clicks? To why is our LinkedIn page so lacking in content that's going to be appealing to candidates, but sounds like a robot's written it? Why is it like this? So for me, I fell into it, but why is it of interest is I'm someone that really believes that there's an emotional reaction when it comes to moving jobs. And that comes back to my first job, which was in an agency, one of my first job when I left uni. And I had a brilliant boss, absolutely superb boss. And I remember saying to me, as I was doing my training, I was in the Windsor office, and she said, you've got to remember, Charu, that moving jobs, moving house, getting married, or, a big significant step in a relationship are core milestones in someone's life. And recruitment is responsible for moving jobs. So it's that emotional connection. And for me, that's quite magical. It can be challenging. Lots of the EVPs I've worked on are huge, complex programs of change, which is never easy and never all fun all the time. It's not rainbows and unicorns, but it's a magnetic emotional change, moving a job. If it works well, it's brilliant. If it works really badly, it's awful. You can't sleep and so on. So we are responsible for that massive change in someone's life. So it's quite powerful. Or maybe I'm power crazed. I don't know.
Oh, no, I feel like we're going to get
No.
emotional.
No. Do you know what Charu is making me remember is when we talked to Dominic Joyce. He said something about the emotional connection with jobs. He related it to relationships and dating, and we went off on a tangent about dating at the time. But it's true, isn't it? You do have such a big emotional connection to changing jobs that you maybe don't take it in really at the time. It's maybe just another phase that you think, I'm just going to move roles, but actually it's huge.
And I think, like what you're saying, Charu, I think recruiters forget that too. I think it's just because, again, it's just bums on seats.
It's their day to day.
It's just what they do every day. They're just in a pit of getting somebody in for an interview, just doing. Poor recruiters. Shout out to the recruiters. Yes, they have a tough job. But I think we forget that actually when we are rejecting someone or even offering someone, the impact of what that will have on their life, just like when you're getting a divorce or you're getting married or whatever, like it's such a that kind
That's why
of
it's so
route,
sad to see all
isn't
the
it?
ghosting that happens at the minute.
Yeah.
Especially with people involved in TA, because it's almost like, one of your own. It's quite hard to see that. I've seen a lot of posts about that.
But I think what Amy just said it's a really valid point. I think recruiters do have a really hard job. And I've been a recruiter, but I also feel like that's part of the problem, where if you haven't made it really clear how important the job of a recruiter or an employer branding or a sourcing or the administrator, who ultimately is the glue of that whole function, is to bringing people in. It's not the requisition and then the candidate and then the applicant and so on. It's actually you're changing someone's potential ability to pay their mortgage or move up in their career. And for me, kind of your point made a point in my mind, which is I worked at Primark and I was part of the employer branding kind of launch into the US. I've also worked at Ferrero, and the things that stayed with me were when I was at Ferrero, going and visiting a factory about where they made Nutella, going to a factory in India and actually seeing types of jobs that people were doing. And I think, yes, those are FMCG, it's very relatable. Same at Unilever, went to Indonesia and saw where they make ice creams and so on and so forth. Often because we've lost sight or because budgets are shorter and smaller, and people, there's a lot of reduction going on in headcount, that whole important from the TA leader or the chief people officer or, the MD if it's a smaller enterprise, to get the recruitment team understanding what they're doing, not just from a process perspective, but what actually that person's doing is key. And I bring it up because I think it's a really hard time to be a recruiter at the moment, really hard. Lots of different pressures and so on. But I think that whole link to what are we doing that's changing lives, but also what are we doing when we're rejecting people is part of that same virtual circle.
And do you think then, based on kind of what you just said, where you went actually out into the field of these roles to kind of get a genuine feel of what it's like to work at the company, is that would you say, in your opinion, a necessity for someone or a company or a marketing team that's building out an EVP, that they need to go and get a genuine feel for what it's, because I think so many, you get lots of, I don't know, whoever it is that's creating your EVP marketing, whoever, that will just get the message from the top, create content, maybe even nowadays use AI to write something for the website, create an image, but they don't even believe it. So if they were actually out on the field, like you say with Primark, maybe a day in the life of what a retail assistant is like, they might actually get a feel for that. I don't know. Do we think that's important? Is it?
I think it's really important. I think, any well-rounded EVP process will include proper interviews with different parts of the business, especially, those the jobs that, will fall out of what they're looking to hire in those next 2-3 years. Is it key for marketing too? Not necessarily, but it's always really, really helpful to have that context of what's going on in the business and what does it actually mean. And I'll tell you why, what you just said actually is really powerful is if it doesn't resonate with all different parts of that business, the EVP and the employer branding messages, from the tagline to the kind of the things that you're saying on your LinkedIn or on your Instagram or, on your website just sound false, and they're not then carried by everyone in the organisation, which we all know, the three of us know, that's where you live and breathe. If the employees do not believe and say with their with confidence and credibility, this is really what it's like to work here, not necessarily every day, but this is what it's like to work here, this rings true with me, that's when your messaging falls down. So I think, to your point, it's key. I recognise it's not, in some industries it's not simply possible, but in where it is, I think it also will add some interest and fun and context to what is really a hard job at the moment. You can't underplay how, under the cosh a lot of the recruitment teams are at the moment, being asked to do everything under the sun.
For nothing. But on a lighter note, I must say I'm super jealous of Ferrero Rocher because it's my favourite Christmas treat. I get the little pyramid or the multi-selection ones. Ferrero Rocher's got a place in my heart. But you talk about EVP and the people involved, and we were chatting about this before in the pub.
Which I wasn't invited to.
Because that's where our thought leadership happens.
Again, no
Which we
invitation.
did mess up. We did have a drink without Charu. We
can still have one after. We will make it up to her. But
too busy.
But we were thinking about it because we don't have the leadership. We don't run employer branding. We don't work in marketing. We don't own the value proposition in any way, or maybe we do because we're a part of the business and we're employees and we represent the company, etc. But where does EVP truly belong, and how does that hierarchy look in an organization, or how should it look in order to generate what you deem as good recruitment?
Because EVP can be anything, right? It can be your values, like it could be your culture, it could be anything. It
could be your benefits package.
Benefits. So where do you begin? Where do you begin to get a good EVP for an organisation?
Yeah, so I think it's all those things. It is the benefits, the reward, and it is the culture, and it is the first thing that you just mentioned. And I can't remember for the life of me what you just said.
Values.
It's values. So it's all those things. It's basically why an organisation wants you to come in to work or to do your work and enjoy it. And part of that is the values. There'll be some companies and some sectors you don't want to work for. Why? It's because the values and the things they stand for. reward. I mean, ultimately, none of us work for free, right? The opportunity to grow and work with different types of people. So it's that, if you're just drawing a Venn diagram, or it's all those things. It's it's that both the psychological contract that a company has with you come into, you work for me, and therefore I will give you a safe environment to thrive in. And then the sort of the physical, or the sort of more hygiene factors, which are really key. Clearly, I will pay you on time. I will pay you what you're worth. I will pay you what the market dictates. I will make sure that you're rewarded. I will make sure that you are treated in a way that means that you can grow your career if you want to. Those type of things. So it's sort of that a merging of both the psychological and sort of the attributes of the job. But we all know when you're moving jobs, it's more than the salary, and it's more than the values. It's the emotional. So your point around smart, you don't have an EVP, or you don't think you do. I go back to that diktat that everyone has an employer, every company has an employer brand. You may not be actively nurturing it. You definitely still have an employer brand, because when you're in the pub, which again I wasn't invited to,
not going to let it go.
When I share this on LinkedIn, I will clearly make a point about that. I had no Grey Goose vodka. My ride request of jelly tots and M&Ms were completely missed off. And then, David and I aren't friends anymore, but Amy and I, we still follow each other on Instagram. But anyway, my point is, and there is a really valid point to what I was about to say, which of course I've forgotten. No, my point is, when you're in the pub, or when you're talking to your mates or your family, there'll be companies that you talk about, and I sound really boring now when I'm talking to my family about my company, but there'll be companies that we can all mention, and you'll immediately have a reaction going, yeah, I'd love to work for that company. Why? Because of their employer brand. Or, my God, no, not in a million years.
Yeah.
I'll order stuff. I might buy stuff from them, but I'd never work for them. Again, why? Because of their employer brand. So it's either organisations make a choice to actively nurture and help manage it and amplify it, which apparently is a really terrible word in communications this year, but I still like it.
Amplify.
Yes, apparently it's too overused, maybe by me mostly. But
right, that's your essential.
Word.
I like it too.
David's called me out recently for saying essentially, apparently in every other sentence, but it's essential that I say it. So.
essentially
it was in
true.
one. Well, let's move on from essentially. You'll find the proof.
But that's the EVP is all those different things, and it's sort of the values are key. Articulating those values is where companies can often go wrong. So EVPs can end up being really quite bland because everyone sounds the same. So have you met a company that doesn't say people are our most important attribute? So it's that the distinction. The compelling aspect of it is where the hard work is. That's
where I struggle with all of this, because another, like you've already alluded to, there is a stigma associated to EVP that's a bit of a tick box. Like, we care about D&I, we are on a mission to do good in the world and all of these things. But the reality is, when you're immersed in the company, you see the real behaviours of the executives, you see what they really care about, which is making profit. And suddenly your buy-in to an organisation, it just depletes, because you realise that the EVP is just a false front end. But if you do that, and if you have that way of working, it will soon come crashing down, because your turnover will just consistently go higher and higher, and people won't be aligned to it. I feel so much more connected to a business that I believe in and try harder than one that just puts that false front on. So,
I think from a candidate perspective, though, how do you know what's not bullshit and what's
you don't.
Genuine?
You don't.
That's what I mean. You can't, even when you have, we talk about it, you need to make sure you have content on your career site, and there's videos from day in the life and all of this stuff. But geez Louise, they're so staged and they're told what to say, and so how do you get past that, the bullshit filter?
But the difficulty as well is that the other lens of it, the other side, you've got, I think we can mention them because we're not going to say anything bad about it, but Glassdoor is always people's opinion, or most of the time, you can get existing employees, but people's opinion when they've left a business.
Yeah.
And so invariably they're going to be negative. It's quite hard to speak highly of the company or the CEO. And so you get that false perspective from people that have left. And then you also get the false perspective at the start when you join, and then you get the reality somewhere in between in the middle.
Well, I mean, I don't agree with that.
Okay, here we go.
All,
First fight.
No.
Fight.
Well, I think the first question was, the first point you were saying around, I think it was David, where EVPs can feel a bit smoke and mirrors, can feel a bit disingenuous. Ultimately, an organisation is there, to make money, and if the CEO is interested and invested in that, then good, because we all get paid. So it doesn't need to be smoke and mirrors. I think it's that, as people who work in the talent industry, I've never met an employee that doesn't work in employer branding that cares about an EVP. So it shouldn't be something that you have to hammer home. An employee, if I didn't work in employer branding and marketing, and why would I care what the pillars are and the beautiful graphs and sentiment analysis? And no, I care about how I'm being treated by my manager. I care about, am I being promoted, respected and valued? I care about, actually, is this the work that's being done by the organisation? Is it something that I'm red-faced about and therefore won't over tell my friends, or I'm proud about? And proud doesn't need to be kind of, creating the vaccine for COVID, but actually not somewhere you're embarrassed to work. And I think that's the thing in terms of an employee value proposition. It doesn't need to be something really ivory towered, but it has to feel real.
Yeah.
And that's where, my massive bugbear is that they all, so many of them sound so similar. They get distilled into such big buckets that, and again, going back to that point I made a few minutes ago, all of them start with people, which maybe I'm being really harsh, but where's the distinction in that? If you met a company that says, I wasn't interested in people, that would be something quite alarming, right?
I would love to.
Actually, tagline. But I think
we
now
children.
To Amy's point, how do you kind of get through the BS, right?
Yeah.
So why I disagreed with you is I left Unilever a decade ago, yet I would still wax lyrical. Why would I? Because of the culture, because of the brand, the employer brand, the way they treated me, the way that I left and was exited and so on. So 10 years later, if someone says to me, what's Unilever like? I will wax lyrical. And there are other companies I work for, again, I would, McKinsey, and so on. But there'll be companies I have worked for that I wouldn't recommend. So again, I think Glassdoor and the videos that you're talking about on the website and, the LinkedIn content, you're absolutely right. Some of them, most of them, are so polished, are so heavily scripted, can feel like a falsehood. And, candidates do need to think about, okay, why is that person saying that? I feel the same way about awards. I've worked in a couple of organisations where awards are complete fabrication. You have a team that's going for the awards, but actually the reality of, whether it's DA&I and so on is completely wrong. But I think recognising that we, as a candidate, aren't stupid. It's using all of those different reference points, and especially those kind of the internal connections, to make your mind up and ask and look for those red flags and the green flags in the interview process. So yes, it is really hard to see past the corporate recruitment marketing videos, but that's why the videos I've created, the ones that I am proud about and the ones that I'm not, there's a massive divide because some have been so diluted by the committee-like governance process that actually is lost the essence and the heart and the intent. And then the other point is often we forget, and this is where it all does fall down, is that video doesn't necessarily need to appeal to me. Let's say I'm trying to do a video for a mechanical engineer. I'll always say, talk to the sort of the film, crew, and that includes me, as if it was another mechanical engineer. So even if I don't understand what they're saying, that's great. I'm not going to become a mechanical engineer, but the other talent that's watching it does. And that's where this is where the challenge comes in when you're doing a recruitment marketing area, is you'll have so many different stakeholders who go, you can't say this. And I actually shared something on LinkedIn this morning, which is such a beautiful example of what brave, credible, compelling, brilliant employer branding looks like, that I genuinely can't think of a company that would let that go out, but a German company, mobile company, did. And it was really powerful because the employee being filmed for some corporate video said to the filmer, I'm only being part of this film because I wear a hijab. Now, most companies I've ever worked for, and probably, you know, everyone watching this or listening to this, their corporate comms team would have gone cut, you know. They carried on filming and then actually created some recruitment marketing out of it. And I thought that's brave, and kudos to them for doing it. But that's what really powerful, beautiful employer branding content looks like. It's not a D&I video. And shoot me if I do that again, please.
How did that? I mean, I've got several points. One, she disagreed with my point.
About Glassdoor, yeah.
But
is that not allowed?
Kind of rude. No, I'm joking. I see your point, and I've never looked at it from the perspective that the person working in that role doesn't necessarily need to be preaching about the EVP, and you're right, they don't. You just need to know that the team that you're with, the manager you've got, how they treat you, that is the EVP. It doesn't necessarily be...
Yeah, but how do you know that as a candidate before you join?
Well, it's very difficult. I think but what we've seen, there was a piece of technology that Smart Recruiters had layered on where you had employees filming themselves and then you could scroll through and it was like a reel.
Through Job Pixel.
Is that what that was? Job
Yeah.
Pixel. And that, I mean, we're not sponsored by Job Pixel, by the way.
No.
But that was a really cool concept because I don't think it was necessarily like forced or anybody was scripted. I mean, they let me do one, so, you know, it's always a liability. But it felt more genuine than some of the polished stuff that you see and that people can replicate.
Yeah.
That was it. I don't know, it gave me more of an insight, and different people spoke to different things that impacted them. You know, you had people from different backgrounds, all sorts of different things were talked about, and that gave me a better feel for the organisation. I don't know.
But I think to your point, how does a candidate know? A candidate's not going to make their minds up based on a EVP because they won't even, unless they work in marketing. What, you know, that the EVP is an acronym that we use in sales, we use in marketing, we use employer branding. A candidate will be looking at so many different elements, most of them which will make up the culture in the EVP. But it's that whole, it's all the ingredients. I'll say this till the cows come home, it's the most unsexy part, but it's one of the most important part, is the job advert. And yet, how little attention do we pay to the job advert? I mean, we've all shouted out, you know, and we've praised ourselves enormously because for the last 2-3 years, people are putting at the bottom of their adverts, you know, we welcome, if you want to apply, if you only can do 60% of it, because we've recognised some groups will only apply for jobs that they meet 100% of the criteria. And we've all sat there and gone, aren't we amazing? You know, that's a stepping stone. So I think, you know, to your, you know, and it's a really, you know, valid point you've brought up, you know, how does a candidate know? But a candidate doesn't need to know this is the EVP. They need to think, this role, is it interesting? But also candidates on this aren't a monolith, right? Because what's important to me for my next role and what's important to you and David, they're not the same. And now we're going into generalizations, you know, like generational generalizations, but that is BS. Right. So I think it's that whole, we shouldn't get so hung up about, do they know what the EVP is? They should know what the company stands for, and they should know enough about the role because, and I think this was LinkedIn data from last week, or was it CIPD data? I can't remember now, but something like, it's a massive percentage. It felt like, I think it was like over 50%. I'll have to take it out for you, that candidates who then become employees are saying the expectation of the role that they applied for and therefore took versus the reality of the role that they're living and doing every day are different, and so different that they are unhappy. And I do think it's over 50%. That to me is really bad employer branding. That is not an EVP piece. That's really bad recruitment marketing. That's really poor alignment with the hiring manager community and what's being said outside, and a really broken interview process.
That's massive.
Massive. I think it's CIPD data.
Yeah, I wonder why that is though, because
Because it's that job description though, isn't it? There's a lot of AI now that's writing the job description, like, you know, write me a job description for a recruiter, and it just sells the dream. Whereas you then come in and it could be you're more focused on this particular area or this particular industry. You're doing more of an admin role, and then you come in and it's
I also think that there's some onus on the candidates to take ownership of that as well, in my opinion. I won't start a role and, you know, in an interview, you are interviewing the interviewer as well. And
but not a lot of candidates feel comfortable to do that though.
No, especially in this market. And remember, we work in the talent industry, right? So we know an interview is a two-way process. I'm not saying not everyone knows that, but I don't think it's about the AI. I think it's, the brilliant recruitment starts going not well and horribly wrong, I would say, is when that kickoff meeting or that strategy meeting doesn't take place between the hiring manager and the recruiter. And the companies that do this well that I've worked at are places like BP, where at BP, we rolled out a process. This is going back some years now, but it was so empowering that if the hiring manager did not spend time with you as a recruiter, I remember I was recruiting there for engineers, subsea engineers, which are some of the hardest things to find in the world. If you did not give me that 45 minutes to talk about the role and the requirements and you as a manager and your team and the projects and so on, that requisition would not go live on the ATS. And that was empowering. And it was the same for interviewing. We rolled out interviewing. So I've met recruitment teams and recruiters now that because the market is harder and you've got, we want someone and we're really busy because, we're trying to win business and make money because the company's not doing well. Just copy and paste the job advert, off you go. And the recruiter is still quite subservient in the maturity model of TA and goes, okay, Mr. Hiring Manager, that's half the problem. It's that subservience. It's that, Mr. Hiring Manager, there's an accountability for the role that sits with you as much as it sits with me. And you're right, with the candidate as well. But that's where it'll fall down, because recruitment marketing can't happen really elegantly if, and Mitch Sullivan talks about this a lot really well, that intake meeting or that kickoff meeting, whatever we'd like to call it, is critical.
And that's what you mandated.
Yeah, at BP.
Yeah, I was looking at your background, and I think I saw a comment on there that you said you'd mandated a few things to improve the process. So that was one of them, where you mandated that 45-minute alignment between hiring manager and recruiter.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mandate it. So, it was part of, we were re-engineering and re-looking at the talent function.
Yeah.
When I was at BP. And we had an amazing VP of talent, and I was obviously part of that kind of function. But what I did mandate, because every recruiter, is a part of that, and I was a recruitment manager, was that if a hiring manager, because we've all met them, I'm too busy, just get it live. I was empowered enough and was confident enough, because I had the backing of my boss, to go, the requisition won't go live until you spend that time with me. And I think that's the difference. And we also, I went to Angola, Azerbaijan, Staines to roll out interview training. So again, that was a mandate. If you didn't do this interview training, which was a half day, and BP's a massive company, so maybe companies that are smaller can't do that. But again, recruitment is an exercise in corporate reputation, is an exercise in changing lives. We've talked about that earlier, and it's expensive. So you wouldn't expect someone to go onto the shop floor and create, a piece, use a piece of equipment. We have massive expectations on hiring managers, all of which think they're brilliant interviewers, to conduct these sort of exercises without training, or regular training, rather.
It's very true. I mean, I've done interviews, and I have been a general manager in restaurants before, so I've done interviews at that level, but I've never really been taught techniques, what I should and shouldn't say, when to speak, when not to speak. I don't think hiring managers are ever really given that training, really.
I remember I did one of my first roles kind of in this space. I did a training session. I won't say for what company, but I did a training session on best practice for interviews, and it was like a half day, and there was lots of variation of types of people, but there was a guy that was a bit older, and he'd been in the space, he'd been interviewing for 50 years, and he knew everything about it, and was like just huffing and puffing in the session. I was like, sorry, am I keeping you? Like, is there anything? Wow, I've just been doing this. I know you. I don't need you to teach me. And like, this is why you're here. That's why. It's because you just don't know. No, everybody just thinks because I've been interviewing, I'm good at it, or I can, But like you said, you need to give the opportunity to the candidate to almost empower them to be like, why aren't you asking me any questions? That should also be a flag, I think.
But yeah, I agree. And I think also, recruitment teams, so I kind of rolled out recruitment training for for teams, because elements of DEI that recruiters are being increasingly asked to focus on can feel can make you feel quite exposed. So, again, it's that toolkit, it's that confidence, it's that recognition that, that the recruiters are also on the front end. And again, that corporate risk and corporate reputation falls down if they're not in a position to understand why they're saying certain things. I saw last year a couple of posts go viral on LinkedIn where you had a recruiter, again, I'm sure no malice was involved, and it was an American recruiter, reach out to what was quite frankly a candidate from an unrepresented background. I think they were sort of Asian heritage, and their in-mail, which is what went viral because the candidate post was like, our company is looking for diverse hires. Your picture fits this profile, so can you respond to this? And it was that blunt instrument that was being used without malice, with a lot of stupidity, but without malice, I'm sure, because clearly the recruitment team had not been given any kind of training about why they were being asked to go and find people from different types of backgrounds. So I think it's both hiring managers. I believe it's both hiring managers and recruitment teams that need to have regular training, because things do change and we aren't all experts in everything all the time, right?
I think for me, recruitment is still, well, people might argue it's different, but recruitment is still transactional. You still have the concept of I need to fill a role and I've got to tick a box in certain areas. But if people are not buying into the reason why, they're not understanding it, then it's shown and showcased in an example like that, which is just shocking to see that would still go on. But to some extent, I can understand how it's happened because of what they've been instructed to do.
Yeah.
Get this amount of people from this, culture, background, gender, whatever it is, and tick the box. It's not about building an inclusive workforce, which is then going to generate a better environment to work in. You're just hitting the numbers.
Well, I mean, I say this like a mantra. It's not about creating D&I into your recruitment process or it's about creating an inclusive recruitment process. I mean, that's the end goal. That's what we are trying to do. And that's what I want to create. And that's what I will create wherever I go, wherever I work, if I'm able to, without any limitations. And I think that's the thing in terms of it's when that type of thing goes viral, when more and more examples of diversity when it comes to recruitment are seen as what's a quota, or look at what's going on there, it's just a cottage industry, is why then you get ridiculous, awful, horrible, stupid tweets like the one from Elon Musk around DEI must die, because it's feeding into that rhetoric of it's this means I don't get what I want, this means that, when actually it's being done. Recruitment is being done to create a much more inclusive process so that everyone is being given the opportunity to succeed. Doesn't mean everyone's going to get the job, but it means that, those privileges or those individuals that may not have applied, you're going actively to invite them to apply. That doesn't mean you're going to get the job, but actually it just means you're broadening the talent pool. But that kind of rhetoric where recruitment teams were and are being tasked, go and do this, but with no narrative, no real understanding, no support behind why you're doing it. And often that narrative is not given to the hiring managers or the business. So you have a kind of real, I want the job filled because the transactional piece, I've got an empty job. Why am I being told I need to have a diverse shortlist? Just give me who I want. Let me, and if you don't do it, I'll go and ring my favourite headhunter up who will, that type of thing.
And that's where the agency costs suddenly soar as well, it all clicks together, doesn't it?
Such a big cycle, isn't it?
Yeah, but you don't think about it all like that, do you? I think that's when we think about opinions related to EVP, it's never really connected, or we don't see it all connected to the business outcomes and the business impact, and it's huge.
I think it also just has to be driven from the top. I think you said it right at the beginning. Your employees that have been working there 5 years, 6 years, 2 years, however long, they have to believe it too. Because if you're then going into an interview panel where you're meeting more people, if they don't believe it, or you're not getting a true, genuine, I think you even said it in the videos, it's okay to say this is what it's like 80% of the time. The other 20%, it is tough, it is hard, it is going to be a challenge, but just giving that as a genuine kind of insight into the company, rather than being like, yeah, we focus all about employees and we give you these benefits and we give you that. It's just, I don't know, I think if and when I become a candidate, I think that will land, especially for me anyway.
No, and I think some companies are doing this really well, where I've heard, examples of 2 or 3 companies I know of, big brands actually, where as part of the interview process, the candidates offered up an opportunity to go and talk to someone from an employee resource group. Again, no license to say, the employee resource group can say what they want, but the candidate gets, the ability to ask the questions they want to, which again is a D&I mechanism, but actually really powerful, right? So I think, someone said it earlier, it's up to the candidate as well to do their homework completely, and it's never fail-safe. We've all been there where we've joined a company and thought, this isn't what I signed up for. But I think, doing all the elements of due diligence, and employees feeling like, yes, it's not so aspirational that I look around and think this isn't what it's being sold out, because that makes it feel so unreal. But 80% of the time, this does match my expectations of my work. And if it's a bit aspirational, which it should be, that also feels like stuff I've heard from the CEO about this is the direction of the company.
How do companies get it right then? What do they need to? What's the foundation that they need to put in place to make sure that their EVP is good? Start
inside first. It sounds so obvious, but I've never done this because I've always worked, inside first. It's how I was taught. It's how, it's got to be knitted together. So, and start not thinking about this top down or bottom up. It's got to meet in the middle. So you'll have, of course, everyone's opinion from, a senior level, board level, 1 level down, 2 levels down. And their reality is just as important, but also talk to the individuals that are doing the roles at the more junior end, and talk to different segments. So, I've worked for organisations that are beautiful head offices on Blackfriars Bridge, but also have factories all around the world where people are making ice cream. So making sure that you've got the different segments before you start knitting together those EVP messages and those EVP pillars. So kind of the messages come after the pillars. And again, I'm just talking language. What am I saying? It's, what are the 3/4 things that are distinctive? Because that's where the magic happens, and that's where also the blandness occurs. So if your EVP sounds very much like it's about people and its purpose, what exactly different is that to the other 20 companies out there that are doing the same as you? And I'm not saying people and purpose aren't important. Of course, I'm not saying that. But if that's where your EVP lands, you've either spent an awful lot of money or, some significant amount of time. And I'm not saying it needs to be a year. It doesn't need to be, 6 months. It can be done as agile as you want to. But those people and purpose are the ones I keep picking on. I'm sorry, but those are the ones that come up again and again and again. Again, really important. But where's the distinction in that?
People, purpose and passion is another one. But I just want to jump in on that.
Yeah.
How many times have you, you don't have to name employers, but how many times does it come from the top down, as in, this is our new values? It comes from the top. It never comes from the middle, or at least I've not witnessed it come from the middle, where you've just articulated, you've got the shop workers, the execs, figure it out internally inside, have that sort of discovery, and build it out from there. Not let's list these because that's what ticks the box publicly.
Yeah.
Like
it's
so
true
though.
It's so true.
It's like, these are our new values. These are our things that we're going to follow against. Whereas it's like, where did these come from? Where did that message?
And that's why the facade, or not just why, but that front end facade of people saying, well, it's nothing like what they advertised. It's nothing like I believed it to be. That's because it doesn't exist, because it was falsely driven from top-down people that don't understand every angle and avenue of the business.
But also it's, without disagreeing with you, because I don't want to do that again, because
I
told
we
off
go.
earlier.
She's coming for you, Dave.
It might be
She's
their
coming
reality.
for you.
It might be their reality, though. So those things...
Their perception of it, right?
Yeah, and I think it's that whole... Because I've also been in that, and I did a post last year, I wrote an article for a magazine, which I'm really proud of, because it was called like, set your values on fire because no one believes them. Because I think that that is often the case where they are so fabricated. I'm not saying they're not important, but they're so fabricated, or they're so much seen as an exercise in vanity. It's for the neon sign behind reception, or the town hall, and then no one ever, sees them again. Values should be lived and breathed. And, I've worked for one company where values were really key, and they were in actually every room, and everyone bought into them because they were in every room and they were talked about, and they were really about how you behaved. And the crucial point was they were how you behaved. So if you didn't behave in that way, there were repercussions. And I think that's where the pushback about values comes is, okay, you're saying this. Let's use kindness as an example, or respect, because that comes up a lot, doesn't it? Right? Mm-hmm. But actually, if you see lots of pockets of leaders not behaving in a kind and a disrespectful way, and they get promoted, or there's never any repercussions, because even though there's a constant retention issue in that team and everyone knows why, but actually that leader is a brilliant sales leader, and so you kind of excuse the fact that he's a bit of an idiot. But so you're not going to believe in those values because there are no repercussions for people who don't follow them, and that's when they become a kind of an exercise in fabrication and just a program of vanity. Program of vanity, I like that. We should use that as a hashtag.
And you were answering Amy's question before I interrupted about where you begin, and you were full flight there. You'd said about beginning in the middle, building it out, and we were talking about, I think you'd said the word pillars.
Yes, starting inside. I mean, the kind of if I'm going to take away anything from this, is start inside. Dump any kind of preconceptions. So kind of don't walk into a room thinking this is what we want to say, and also have a sprinkling of aspiration in there. It doesn't need to be this is what we like today. It has to have some aspiration to it, because no one wants to do an EVP exercise every 3 minutes, right? It's important to re-evaluate, I'd say every couple of years, or if something significant changes, the business strategy's changed, or you're going into a new territory, or you've sold a part of the business, it's significant, something's changed, of course look at your EVP. But I think starting inside first, and then test internally. We're going to say these are our messages, these are the things that we think are important. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Because if you don't test internally first, you have the environment that we have where you've seen, like with the employee engagement scores, where they go lower and lower and lower. And I'm not saying the scores go lower, but the people filling them out, the responsive rate goes lower, because actually you sit there and go, well, I did it last year and I did the year before and nothing's changed, or my feedback was never taken on board, or worse still, we got invited to a town hall and all we heard was the positive messages, but no one's listening to the things that we said were broken. And so people just get very disengaged and don't fill it out. So starting internally with, does this resonate? And then start messaging externally, and start with the content. And again, I can't, I've said this 3 or 4 times, no one has got huge amounts of budget, and, and maybe it's that kind of, that frugalness will help us to sort of test and think, actually, let's think about where's the wonky wheel, where's the bleeding kind of area that, we can't find digital talent, or we're really struggling in Poland, or do you know what, that factory up in Derbyshire, we can't find individuals. So let's just start small and pilot the messages that are most resonant to that sort of population, or that talent segment. So again, I think it's, being really bold in thinking internal first, rather than, it's really easy to go, we've got something, let's launch externally because it's, really exciting and we can get a bit of a buzz behind it, and then recognize it's not about the tagline, which again in EVP is not the tagline. So I think that's really, start experimenting, and don't feel afraid that actually you start small. There's nothing wrong with that, and pilot and see how it's received. What's wonderful about technology, and the data we have access to now, certainly in the last 10 years, is you can see how things are being, received and performed, and you can talk to people internally, and you can use the data you get externally and internally, and start thinking, actually, is this working? And pause and think, okay, it's this pillar isn't, or actually this is, we feel like it's working, but actually people aren't believing it in this particular location. Well, that tells you that you're going to have to go and do some more convincing, or launch it with a lot more credibility, put a lot of more energy to it. So I think it's just being a bit more nimble in how you approach these things versus this is a big project. And projects by its very essence, a project has an end date. You've done the project now, finished, on to the next thing. It's just discrete. It's got a timeline, it's got budget, it's got resource. An EVP is not a project, right?
And that's very true as well. There's a lot of obvious statements
yeah.
that make sense, but you don't think about them because people come to us, don't they, with, I've got a project related to EVP. Okay, what's the project? What's the end date? And it's like a continuous cycle.
Yeah.
I like that. What you were saying around the testing internally, it has to come from somewhere, right? The messaging. So if it does come from the top, then see what's going to land well with the employees. Like this one might land quite well, but then this one's not going to get as much positive feedback. So maybe we pivot and change slightly. So,
and why? Why isn't it? Why isn't it going to land? What have we got? What have we done wrong there? And this year, both two big kind of innovation and sort of employee reports. One's from Ogilvy, one's from the Edelman Trust Barometer, which has been going on for like 24, 25 years. Both kind of talk about advocacy as being key trends and key areas to focus on. So trust in organisations, trust in the CEO, trust in governments is reducing. And that kind of peer, if you think about it, then becomes more important, because if I'm going to have a degree of cynicism with the CEO and the board and the C-suite all saying, this is a fabulous place to work because I've just been to this offsite and so on, which you see a lot on LinkedIn, because they're all being actively, come and become the top voice. So, and you see these lovely posts, but that's being received with cynicism, right? Then that employee credibility becomes more and more important. Not that lip service to go and say this text, Mr. Employee, but actually in his own words becomes really, really key, incredibly important. So I think, testing it and understanding if it doesn't resonate, why doesn't it resonate? What have we got wrong?
Am I allowed to ask my question?
You can, but I feel like Charu will not give you an easy answer for it.
No, that's just for you, David. Don't worry.
She was going to disagree with me then. It's going to be a super easy answer.
So I have a bit of a question that I like to ask the guests, in that you have a wish, a magic wand, whatever it may be, that gives you the power to create or change something in EVP, in your world, whatever it may be. If you had that, what would you do?
Sorry, it's a really lovely question.
Thank you, Charu.
I'm right, aren't I?
No, and I say this as you too. No, I like David really. He's all right.
Everybody likes him really. He's a big softie deep down.
I'll do two, but I'll call them 1A and 1B, so it does feel like I've answered your question.
I mean, we'll let it pass, but it's okay.
So I think the first one is that whole changing it so it doesn't exist in a bubble. It's not a program, because I think that's dismissive of the change that an employee value proposition can bring to an employee and a candidate when done well. So I think, not existing in a bubble within HR and talent, or marketing and talent. And then the second one is 1B, because I want to answer Amy, so it's one. It's this ridiculous D&I. We want to do a D&I video for the EVP, or we want to do a D&I campaign for X, as if D&I, or the notion of attracting people from unrepresented groups, is something different to the mechanics of what you're trying to do in recruitment marketing. Ultimately, whether you're a brown woman or a black man, or a person who's got neurodiversity, who sort of is on the neurodiverse spectrum, there are elements that are, of course, different in how you might need to be communicated to, or the types of messaging and content that you might want to see that allows you and makes you comfortable in applying for a job. But it's not over here. And this for me, it's so insulting, or when it's, because I've been in that meeting room too often, Amy, where it's some person has said, well, we want more black people, so go and put something on a job board, or let's and this is, we need some more brown people in this particular area, so we've got 4 or 5 X type of brown people in let's get a video together. And it's tokenism at its worst, and it's disrespectful, and D&I isn't something separate. D&I diversity, having diverse teams for the 8th or 9th year in a row, the McKinsey Insight, McKinsey's reports tell you that make more profitable businesses. That's been going on for 8 years now, right? So it's not a business, it's not an HR piece, not a talent piece, but why it exists in this sort of super bubble over here, often hidden in HR, then brought out for when it needs to be come out for awards and so on. That does my head in, if you can't tell already.
I like that.
I like that. And it also relates to a comment my friend said to me, I think last week. She said that diversity shouldn't even be in the catchphrase D&I, because if you have an equitable and inclusive process, you automatically have diversity. And I was like, okay. She leads D&I for her company that she works for, but I was like, I've never thought about it like that. You don't need to label diversity if you have an inclusive and fair process in your organisation. You don't need to necessarily go about it and label it in that way.
It should just be.
It should be, and you should have a team that are ready to accommodate those things, and it should just be. But
also, that's where it lends itself, this sort of blunt tool of let's go and find lots of diverse people, but actually no one, or rarely, is the diagnostics and the audit done internally of, okay, when those brilliant people who are joining leave within 12 months, or when we do big redundancy programs are disproportionately impacted because our reward mechanism, our performance mechanism is flawed and biased, it hasn't been examined. So when you just talk about diversity and what as one component, it's so easy to make it a TA problem, and it's not. It's let's look at all elements, and again that whole creating an inclusive workplace, then everyone benefits.
Talking of benefits, I think this podcast has benefited me massively in terms of just positioning, employer branding, D&I, that whole piece. It's just something that I don't know, not really had much of a focus on in my head. So I think it's been very insightful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't know what to say. But no, but
It's not often that Dave is stuck for words, actually.
No, it's not. And I think the reason I am is because there's a lot of thoughts going around in my head about what Charu has said and shared, and some things that stare you right in the face that you just take for granted and you don't question them. And there's a lot of things that have given me a lot of food for thought. So thank you very much for coming on, Charu. It's been a very quick hour.
No, thank you. I've really enjoyed it, and you've made it really quite easy to have a conversation. So thank you. I hope people that are listening enjoy it, and I hope that they, if they've got any questions or disagree with us, which is really key as well, because it's not an echo chamber. They reach out to you or me and Amy. We have a good, conversation on LinkedIn about it.
Absolutely.
Bring it on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Where's the grey goose?
All right. Wow.
Amazing. Thank you. No, thank you.
That was one of the quickest hours.
It's so interesting. So thank you. Make it so easy. Oh. I hope I hope we've got some good sound bites. I feel like we did, right?
100%. The trailer for that will